what is up guys, JTX here. With PoE 2 just around the corner, I thought I'd put out one final video for PoE 1, and what better way to finish off PoE 1 builds with one of the most PoE-like builds you can have with the Aberrath Autobomber. This is a disclaimer at the very start of the video. This is not a cheap build. This uses a original Sin and a Mage Blood. There are obviously budget alternatives to building this, but the way I built this character has quite a high price ceiling. If you are looking at trying to copy this build, just be aware that there are some key items that you need to pick up that are pretty expensive. With that being said, this is version 2 of my Aberrath Autobomber. I posted a Autobomber video all the way back, I believe in December last year, so pretty much 1 year ago, talking about the original concept of this build and how I played it back in Delve League. And that build itself was pretty fun. It used Annihilating Light, it was Impulsor, it was the traditional Lightning Cold version of Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice. This version you're seeing here today is a lot more unique. It's a Chaos-based Autobomber using the original Sin unique ring here. This ring converts all your elemental damage into chaos damage, so our Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice both deal chaos damage instead of the regular elements. There's some pretty interesting design decisions when coming to make this build because of the nature of how ailments work in terms of freeze or shock or chill. By default, none of these elements can be applied with chaos damage, and we have to kind of find a way around that in order to actually make our Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice work, because both of those are conditional on getting those ailment effects. How we make Herald of Ice actually pop is with Expedition's End. It makes all damage can freeze. So this just means that our chaos damage is capable of freezing enemies, so that can pop our Herald of Ice, so they can actually shatter and explode, starting our chain of explosions. Just because all damage can freeze doesn't mean it will. You still need to get freeze chance somewhere on your gear or on your tree. The way I've accomplished this is getting tattoos all the way across the tree. So tattoo of the Arrow Hungry Warmonger, 5% chance to freeze. I grab, I believe, 20 of these across the tree, and that gives me a 100% chance to freeze on my Herald of Thunder and also on my Herald of Ice. We are running Elementalist once again because we have some good Ascendancy nodes here, notably Shaper of Storms, allowing all damage can shock. That means your Chaos damage can shock. This is really important because it allows our Storm Secret to start the Herald of Thunder when you shock an enemy with our Chaos damage. In this case, we're using our Aberrath's Hooves. As soon as we step over an enemy, we shock them because of our Ascendancy, and then that starts our Herald of Thunder. In the previous version of the build, you had to kill an enemy or kill a shocked enemy to start your Herald of Thunder loop. So we got around that normally with just killing a mob with Aberraths, but also we used a Worm Flask to summon worms and kill those in case our Herald of Thunder turned off. That was kind of like a janky way of doing it. This way is a lot better. It's a lot less unreliable. You can just pretty much run into a mob and then you'll start the Herald of Thunder loop straight away. This has been a really cool difference in that previous version of the build and this build. Obviously, this ring also gives a huge amount of damage to Herald of Thunder as well by increasing the frequency of it hitting. As I mentioned in my first video, there are very few ways to actually scale Herald of damage, and that's kind of the reason why Herald builds have kind of fallen off in the meta, because there are just so few ways of actually scaling their damage in a reliable way. The best ways to actually scale the damage are in itself with gem level, penetration, increased damage taken, just generic sources of damage. And getting that on the tree is pretty difficult. Luckily this league though, we have a special enchant from Runesmithing that allows increases and reductions to minion damage to affect you at 150% of their value. So what this means is, it's just a stronger version of this node here, Spiritual Aid. So this essentially does the same thing. It just allows increases and reductions in minion damage to affect you, but the bow or the rune enchant is just a juiced up version. And this is really cool because it gives generic increased damage, which affects heralds. And getting that normally is only through elemental damage or through specific chaos damage. It's kind of annoying to get on the tree. With this single enchant, you can take a Elegant Hubris, and you have nodes like Slumlord here, which give 80% increased damage. So when you amplify that with the rune enchant, this node gives 120% increased damage, and I believe I have 2 of these nodes here for 240% increased. You can potentially get a better Timeless Jewel than me and have 3 or 4 nodes in this area. And the damage kind of ramps up. The bow itself also has a roll for 143% increased, so that goes up to almost like, what, 210% increased damage. So you can see where the damage scaling comes from. So this is like one of the ways that you can actually scale the Herald damage a lot easier and a lot more effectively than before. and also why I wanted to experiment with this variant of the Autobomber. Now, I'll quickly go over the rest of my gear. The gear itself isn't too crazy. So as you saw before, my bow is just a synthesized bow with the Runesmith and also the synthesis implicit for +1 socketed support gems. Ideally, in this slot, you also have this mod here, which enemies you kill have a 25% chance to explode. So you ideally want this roll and this roll together, so on a double or triple synthesized base. At this point of the league, it's obviously really hard to find bows like that. I don't think they even exist at all. But potentially, if you were running this build in a fresh league, you could try roll it yourself with Vivid Vultures to go for these two mods on a single base. On the actual rolls on the bow itself, we've just crafted it with a generic increase socketed gems with minion damage and a chance to deal double damage, and then multi-modded for support gems and double damage while focused. So double damage is one of the few ways we can actually increase or scale the damage of heralds. A lot of the other crafts don't really benefit herald damage, so that's kind of the reason why we have double damage on the bow and just gem levels instead. For our helmet, it's a generic suppress helmet with mana reservation efficiency, and we've rolled it for more reservation efficiency on the implicit and a bit of AoE. The main thing here is you need to open suffix to craft trigger socketed spells when you focus, because we want to try to synergize with the fact that we have a focus synergy here on our bow where we deal double damage while focused. What this actually does is when you press focus, it also triggers spells in this helmet. Mainly it's just our Assassin's Mark. There's no other spell that can be triggered. Essentially, this is just a big single target damage boost. You can press it if you want, it's not always necessary. But this is the only button you would ever press in this build, only for single target. Most of the time I don't press it for most map bosses. The only time you press it is if you're fighting actual endgame bosses. Just note that synergy that you have the focus that allows you to trigger Assassin's Mark and also your double damage at the same time. Now for the amulet, this has kind of been the popular choice for the league. It's a focused amulet with +2 all and +2 lightning skill gems with global crit multi on it. You would miss this ideally after locking it and go for a +4/+4 with about 150 plus crit multi. So the amulet can kind of go crazy here. Obviously, I haven't put that level of investment in this build, so this build actually has quite a bit more potential to go further. Even though it's pretty expensive already, you can absolutely push this build even further. You can probably get double or maybe even triple the damage that I have right now on my build if you really want to invest into this build. The quiver, this is a synthesized quiver. Because, like I said before, there's very few ways to scale our damage. Crit and crit multi is a great way of actually scaling our herald damage. So we've tried to look for as much crit multi as possible on this quiver. So I've got a synth base with crit multi and crit strike chance, and rolled it with the essence to give crit multi itself, and then a bit of resistances and life to fill out the rest of the stats. As I said before, the ring itself, Original Sin, just makes all our damage convert to chaos damage. Really powerful ring, allows a lot of different builds to be enabled. Notably, it also allows this build to kind of scale with chaos damage, which hasn't been possible before. And then Storm Secret, pretty much the bread and butter of most Herald of Thunder builds. Our gloves, generic suppress, life, res gloves. There are two implicit mods on here that are very important, your Eater and your Exile mods. Eater mod allows you to leech chaos damage as life. There's actually very few sources that allow you to leech chaos damage as life. This is one of them. So it's really important that you get this roll on the glove. Otherwise, you won't be able to leech back the damage you take from your own Storm Secret, and you'll end up killing yourself pretty quickly. So this is really important to actually get the chaos damage leech on this. The other one is getting freezes you inflict spread to other enemies within 1.5 meters. This is just a really nice quality of life mod. So essentially when you freeze one thing, you can kind of freeze the whole pack in one go. And also when your Herald of Ice explodes, it also freezes other enemies around. So this is actually pretty nice defensively. It allows you to kind of freeze everything around you, so you don't actually have to worry about getting swarmed by packs of mobs. As long as you kill one thing or you hit one thing, everything generally should be frozen around you. The belt is Mage Blood. Pretty typical setup for Mage Blood. Just I'm running a Crit Flask, a Quicksilver Flask, a Evasion Flask, and Armor Flask. Essentially speed, more crit, and defenses. Nothing too crazy here about the belt. You can also sub this in for a Headhunter and just run regular flasks. I did test two variants of the build, one with Headhunter, one with Mage Blood. Headhunter actually worked just as fine. It actually worked really well for really juicy maps where you have tons of rares spawning. I think the upper potential for this build could actually be higher with a Headhunter if you're just using it purely for mapping. If you want to use it for a bit more of mapping and a bit of single target content, then I recommend a Mage Blood because Headhunter doesn't really help in those single targeted scenarios. But just note that Headhunter is also a choice for this build, and you can kind of swap the belts interchangeably in with the way I've built the character. Finally, this is the namesake of the build, Aberrath's Hooves. It's essentially a boot that allows you to create a little small explosions. You see the little fiery explosion behind my character when I step. So every time I take a step, I make a small little explosion behind my character, and that character kind of starts the whole entire loop with Storm Secret, and also does a little bit of damage as well. This is also kind of our utility gem link here. We have a power charge and crit support, so when we're running across enemies, we're also generating power charges for our build. It's a really cool interaction that these boots are still around, and really happy that I could use it in this build still. It kind of defined what the build was in the first variation, and then very earliest iteration in Delve. So I really wanted to keep these boots in the build and make it a really zero button playstyle. So essentially, your character is always going to trigger the Herald of Thunder without you having to press a button or do any interaction at all. For our gem links, we have our single target setup, Herald of Thunder, in our bow. So the Herald of Thunder is linked to Inspiration. Inspiration by itself will not work with Herald of Thunder because Herald of Thunder isn't spending mana. The way we actually get this to work is we run a Inspiration in our chest. Our chest is a automation setup 6-link with Steel Skin, Withering Step, Phase Run, and Enhance. And essentially, this will generate us charges of Inspiration. And as long as we have Inspiration charges on our character, this skill will also benefit from it. And as you can see, I'm already generating Inspiration charges from my automation setup. And because of the Inspiration charges, we also benefit from the Inspiration charges on our main 6-link, so on our actual Herald of Thunder links. So Inspiration support is linked to Herald of Thunder, Enhance, Awaken Void Manipulation, Increase Critical Strike support, and Empower. You can also push this even further by getting Awaken Empower, so getting one more gem level, and one more gem level on Enhance. So those are also potential upgrades you could go for. So you can really push up the damage of this build a little bit more if you want to invest into this character. This is definitely one of those characters where you could just keep investing because the upper range is just so high for a character like this. In our helmet, we're running a Enhance with Assassin's Marks that can be triggered with our Focus, Herald of Ice, and also Arrogance. So Arrogance just makes Herald of Ice reserve life, and Enhance actually gives a crazy amount of AoE to our Herald of Ice because, as you see here, additional effects from quality is additional meters to radius. So it goes from plus 0.2 to plus 0.4, which is a huge amount of AoE. And this is actually combos really well with Assassin's Mark as well, because we have a chance to grant power charges when hit, bumps from 5 or 6 up to 11% chance. So when our Herald of Thunder starts hitting, we'll generate those power charges on single targets really easily. In our gloves, we're running our aura setup, so we have Purity of Elements, Hatred, Enlighten, and Petrified Blood. Petrified Blood essentially is just to allow us to build a little bit more survivability against small hits, and also that's why we're running Arrogance with Herald of Ice to reserve some of our life here. Finally, in our boots, we're running Power Charge on Crit, Void Manipulation, Awaken added lightning damage, and Awaken added cold. So we're just adding some generic damage to the actual Aberrath's Fury, which is the little explosion on our boots, and a bit more utility with our power charge on crit. I'll jump to my passive tree now. We are running Supreme Ostentation, which helps us ignore attribute requirements for the build. It's just kind of nice not to have worry about stats already on a build that's incredibly unique, specific, and very gear specific. So we want to try avoid trying to stretch the build further than it already has with Herald scaling and then Chaos Damage scaling and then also having to get stats. So this is just a little nice node to have. It also allows us to tattoo our tree to give us the chance to freeze everywhere. I highly recommend taking this node because it does allow us a lot of flexibility in our tattoos on our tree. We're running 3 large cluster jewel setups. 2 of them are with Unspeakable Gifts and Wicked Pole. Unspeakable Gifts gives you a 10% chance to cause enemies to explode on death, dealing chaos damage. And we have 2 of these nodes here on our 2 cluster jewels. Potentially you could grab a 3rd one here as well. But I believe 2 felt okay for most of the gameplay that you saw. So I think 2 is a good spot to have with a 20% chance. And you get carried a lot by the Herald of Ice explosions anyway. The 3rd cluster jewel is a elemental one. So with Snowstorm and Prismatic Heart. This just gives a big chunk of damage because you're pretty much getting 8% more damage because everything gets converted to chaos anyway. And this is just a good place to get a bit of resistances. You could also swap this in for a 3rd with Chaos Cluster, so Unspeakable gives Wicked Pole, so a 30% chance to cause explosions. It's up to you. I just found that a bit more damage was nicer. As we are a Herald build, it's really hard to get crit by default, so all of our medium clusters are Herald clusters, so Self-Fulfilling Prophecy and Dark Messenger. We're running, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4 of these clusters, so 4 of these clusters have Self-Fulfilling Prophecy and Dark Messenger, and then the last one here has Self-Fulfilling Prophecy and Empowered Envoy, so this is just a bit more damage. And we have a Watcher's Eye here with crit while affected by hatred and cold damage while affected by hatred. Cold damage isn't as important as the crit. The crit is the main one we want, as it is base crit to everything, including our explosions, our Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder. This is really, really nice to have because it's hard to scale crit on a Herald build where Heralds don't normally have crit, so this is a pretty important jewel for us to take. The only other jewel of note here is a Light of Meaning. This just gives you a big generic amount of chaos damage on the tree. For Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh, we are taking Withering Presence from the Occultist. This just gives us a big chunk of chaos res and also allows us to inflict Wither on enemies for long duration. This also helps with our Withering Step, because when we inflict Wither on enemies, it lasts for a very long time, and also gives us a bit more chaos damage. So it's a good Ascendancy to take all around on the Forbidden Jewels. In terms of our Ascendancy, our key nodes here are Shaper of Storms and Heart of Destruction. We don't really care about Mastermind of Discord because we don't care about exposure. Heart of Destruction is really good because it gives us a huge amount of AoE when we're mapping, and it gives us 30% more elemental damage while we're hitting a unique enemy. That 30% is converted into chaos damage. The final node is Bastion of Elements. This is kind of like a free node. You could potentially take this. You could also go Primordial, Legion of Primordial, or Shaper of Winter. This essentially just gives you a really big Aegis shield here that you see on my character, a 2.9k shield against elemental damage. The interesting interaction with the shield is Herald of Thunder, the Herald of Thunder self-damage from Storm Secret, that is actually taken from this shield. And it's actually quite nice to have this shield as a buffer because essentially it allows us to ignore the downside of the self-damage until the shield runs out. And generally that shield recharges when we're running between packs. If we haven't killed anything in a while, the shield will top itself up again, and then it will protect our life from the Storm Secret loop. One of the final jewels we have here is an Impossible Escape. It's outside the radius of a precise technique. It allows us to grab Entrench, Thick Skin, and Mana Reservation Efficiency. A really, really good possible escape in this area. For Pantheons, we're running a Soul of Arakali. One of the major weaknesses for this build are dots, so we want to try build as much possible defenses against dots. This helps with that by giving us a bit of chaos resistance against the OT and also 10% reduced damage generically over. And then our minor is Soul of Ralakesh, reduce physical damage taken over time while moving and not taking additional damage while bleeding. I just want to say thank you to everyone that's watched my videos throughout the years. I know people mainly know me as the Lebo guy, but I do make other builds occasionally here and then as well. It means a lot to me that you guys are always so supportive of these videos and really interested in seeing how the build progresses. And it makes me really happy as a creator to make more of these videos. I think this is a perfect build as a last send-off to PoE 1 before PoE 2 starts. This is kind of like the epitome of the Zoom Zoom Explode playstyle that PoE 1 has become famous for. And I don't imagine we'll see a build like this in PoE 2 for at least a little bit, but maybe in the future. I think this is why this build perfectly encapsulates the spirit of Path of Exile 1 with the extreme nature of the fun and the craziness that you can achieve in Path of Exile 1. I have a video coming up in the next day or so talking about my plans for Path of Exile 2. I'm most likely to be starting as a mercenary and specking into Witch Hunter, trying to make bleed work there, potentially make that into a bleed bow character as well. As always guys, thanks to you guys for watching. I will catch you guys in the next video.